Good morning, everyone, and Shavua Tov. We begin the book of Exodus this week, the book of Shemot. And it begins by saying these are the names of the family members of the house of Jacob who came to Egypt. And then the verse says, and Joseph was already in Egypt. And Rashi asks, why does it have to say, and Joseph was already in Egypt? We just finished the book of Genesis, which told us the whole lengthy story of how the brothers came to purchase food in Egypt, and Joseph reveals himself to them and reunites the family. Why add the words, and Joseph was already in Egypt? And Rashi answers that the verse is saying that the same Joseph who was the shepherd of his father's flock at the age of 17 before he was torn away from the family by being thrown into the pit was the exact same Joseph who was in Egypt. Joseph didn't change. Even though he had risen to the heights of power and royalty as the viceroy of Egypt, he remained the same humble Joseph. Someone once said that the two greatest tests in life is the test of failure and the test of success. Those are the two hardest things to handle. How do you overcome the disappointments in life and not despair? And at the same time, how do you overcome the temptation to become arrogant and pompous when you reach the heights of success? And indeed, at the end of last week's Torah portion, we find that after the funeral of Jacob, the brothers think that Joseph's going to take revenge. And so they plead with Joseph not to take revenge. And our rabbis ask, how could it be that the brothers thought that Joseph would take revenge? He had shown them nothing but unconditional love for the past 17 years. And our rabbis tell us that when they went back to Canaan, Israel, to bury Jacob in the cave of Machpelah, Joseph went to the pit that his brothers had thrown him into. And he stood over the pit and gazed into it. And so the brother said, why is he going back to the pit? Surely he's revisiting and nursing all the animosity and the hatred and the jealousy that exists. And he is recollecting it in order to take revenge against us. But actually, they completely misunderstood the purpose of Joseph's visit back to the original pit. The reason why Joseph revisited the pit, the rabbis say, was to look into that pit and remember his lowly, humble beginnings, how he was at the bottom of the pit. And God not only drew him out of the pit, but rose him up to the heights of power and royalty, and now he sits on the throne in Egypt. He looked into the pit to feel the gratitude and thankfulness to God that he is no longer in the pit, that God has brought him up to success and to prosperity. And therefore he gave thanks and blessings to God with gratitude, and looked into the pit, so he always remains humble and remembers his humble beginnings. And so too in life, when life brings you success, you could either become arrogant and self-centered, God forbid, or you could look back into your pit and say, I was in such a lowly position. God was so good to me. I have a debt of gratitude, and I must use this newfound success and power as Joseph did to become a source of sustenance and provide for the needs of others, to sustain the country during the years of famine. We as a Jewish people do this every year on the night of Passover. We sit down at the Seder and recall how our ancestors were slaves in Egypt and eat the bitter herbs in order to then have a deeper appreciation for the fact that God redeemed us and now we are a free nation. Every one of us in our individual lives could look back at moments when we were in the pit metaphorically and then feel a deeper appreciation and always remain humble. And that's what the verse says. It was the same Joseph in Egypt, that it was the same Joseph who was the shepherd for his father. His power and success never got to his head and didn't change his righteousness and his goodness. Something absolutely stunning, remarkable happened in America last week. We all know what happened at the Monday night football game at the Buffalo Bills when Damar Hamlin suffered a cardiac arrest. And he was brought to ICU and he was in a coma after being resuscitated on the field for 9 minutes. And for 5 days, he was in a coma. And what did our country do? Two things. You know, when somebody, God forbid, is ill, we do two things in Judaism in our tradition. First thing we do is say a Mishaberach. We pray for the person. And then in the Mishaberach, we give charity on behalf of the person for them to have a recovery. And that's exactly what millions of Americans did. The first thing is all 32 football NFL teams changed their Twitter account profile to say, pray for Damar, and 3, which is the number of his jersey. And then someone found a GoFundMe page that he started for toys for underprivileged children. That the initial goal was to raise $2,500, and over 250,000 Americans contributed to that GoFundMe page, which now stands at over $8 million from the initial goal of $2,500. That is the righteousness of the intuitive sense of every American that knows that when someone is in need, he must turn to God. But fascinatingly, when Damar woke up in the hospital on Thursday, the first question he asked of his doctor that he wrote on a piece of paper was, who won the game? Ironically, the game was never completed because life is more important and the game stopped. But yet, what happened next? The doctor responded and said, you won the game, Damar. You won the game of life. We always have to remember what's most important in this life. It's not the game. It's not the winning and losing. What's most important is the goodness we do, the prayers, the charity, and ultimately, yes, the winner of the game of life was Joseph, because he didn't see it as a competition between him and his brother, but rather he saw what is most vital, which is to be grateful to God and appreciate your blessings. And yes, reunited his family with love and unity. Have a wonderful day.